Farming is very complicated. It can give you a lot of joy, but it can also give you tremendous fear of inadequacy. This is a YouTube series aimed at simplifying the entire farming process for you and making sure every year you get the most out of your fields and your entire farm. Now, it's not going to be cheap, it will be time consuming. However, it'll be worth the rewards. Step 1 is spreading lime. Lime is a field requirement and it is quite expensive to set up because there's only one spreader that will allow you to achieve spreading lime. The game indicates that you should only spread lime every 3 years, but in those years you do not lime, you will lose in the first year 5% of your yield bonus, the second year you'll lose 10% of your yield bonus, the third year and from that year onwards you will have a 15% deduction in your yield bonus. The cost of lime is quite cheap and you'll be looking at around about $800 for a bag that contains 2,000 litres of lime. You can typically expect to use 4,500 litres per hectare, but keep in mind the steeper your fields, the more you will use as your tractor slows down. Lime will not stop spreading regardless of whether you have done it on the spot that you are driving over, so a hectare will cost you around about $2,000. Now the Bredel will cost you $45,000, and then if you go for the cheapest John Deere, which is $45,000 on the top, it is the most affordable tractor, very good value for money, and it's more than capable of using the Bredel to its fullest potential. But don't go for any extensions on the Bredel because it might slow down your tractor, which means you'll consume more lime. Step 2 is mulching. So once you've spread the lime on your field, you should mulch that field. This is an optional thing to do because it will only give you a 2.5% increase in yield and it will not affect your crop's germination. Mulching tools can vary from tiny vineyard mulchers all the way up to industrial farmyard widths. And then step number 3 will be actually tilling your fields, and this can be done in several ways. You can plough, cultivate, disc harrow, power harrow, subsoil or spade. These are all effective ways in real life, and the most commonly used and preferred method in Farming Simulator is to plough or cultivate your field. Now, let's look at ploughing first. So ploughing is actually a really good option to have on hand at your farm. This is because it prevents a 15% reduction in your yield potential if you have periodic ploughing switched on, and it will also make you not grow weeds. And weeds will also deduct your yield potential by 15% if they're not done and used correctly in terms of removal ladders. The downside is that they are very power hungry tools with a small working whip, so you better have a lot of diesel on your farm ready because you're going to need it. If you wanted to add some extra realism to the farm, then after you've ploughed, you can either roll or use a harrow on that ploughed field. This doesn't impact your yield, but it will add a bit of realism, as drilling a plough field wouldn't give you an accurate sowing of the crop, but if you want to get it done quickly, just plough and drill on top of it. And then another popular method is cultivating, which has two variables. We have shallow cultivators or regular cultivators. There is a bit of a difference between them, but they generally do the same job. But a normal cultivator will add stones to your field and a shallow cultivator will not do that. Stones won't hinder your yield, but they will degrade your tools' maintenance levels over time faster than if they weren't there. When you use your shallow cultivator, if you haven't mulched, you'll get what is known as a stubble tillage. To remove this, you'll just simply roll over your field, you'll get a seed bed state, and it will also act as a mulcher for some reason, and then it will boost your yield back to 100%. But if you have mulched, you'll just get a seed bed state. And this doesn't impact your yield, it's simply cosmetic, but it just adds an extra depth of realism. If you do choose to cultivate, you'll need a sprayer or a weeder or a hoe readily available on your farm, as cultivating will generate weeds once the crop has started growing. And if you play with crops destruction turned on, make sure you have narrow wheels on your tractor, so if you do have to do some weeding, you're not going to ruin your crops, but more on that later. Right, so the field is now ready, and now we're going to have to consider our options of what seeds we're going to plant in what field. So if you play with seasons turned on, you should navigate your way over to the crop calendar in the pause menu. This will show you when you should be expecting to plant your seeds and when you should be expecting to harvest the crop. This is vital when considering your options, as time management is key with this. Deciding on your crop even should have some elements of future planning and making the most out of the fields that you already have. So we have cows right now. We should consider a field or two of grass for hay and a grain field, and so we can get the straw for the bedding, and possibly a cornfield for some silage. Since we have 4 fields, we can achieve this and maximise our production for the cow feeder, so we've always got an abundance of feed ready for them when they do eventually give birth. But your circumstances may be different from mine. You may want to plant some soybeans so you can get some juicy profits. You may want to become a potato farmer. This decision is entirely up to you. Have you figured out what you want to do yet? Fantastic, let's move on. So let's go back to the crop calendar. We have decided on wheat. and this is going to be available to sow in September. Corn is in March, and grasses whenever we really want to. So now we need to consider our machines. A seeder will do wheat, barley, oats, green beans, spinach, peas, and more. They are a very good machine. And a planter will do things like sunflower, corn, cotton, soybeans, sugar beets, and other things. If you want vegetables, rice, sugarcane, potatoes, or any other specialist crop, you should check out the menu here, and this will give you a list of all the equipment that's needed. But vegetables have a different tilling approach, and we'll do a future video on them later. Right, so now that we've got the right tool, we need to ensure that the right crop is selected, and then we need to get working. So to drill your field, you just simply lower your seeder, turn it on, and start driving in straight lines. If you don't want to use assisted steering, like I don't like using it, you can always use the ridge markers if your seeder has one. If you follow those marks, you will get a perfect sow. But also, when you're purchasing your seeder or planter, check whether it can distribute fertilizer. If it does, then you can skip the next step because the seeder will do the next step for you. But keep your eyes on the levels, as your seeder will use more fertilizer than it uses seeds, meaning that you may need to refill the fertilizer tank while you're in the middle of the field. So it's always nice to have a tractor with a front loader capability, or you can simply just stop, drive back to where your fertilizer is and fill it up there. Now that your seeds are in the ground, your next step is going to be fertilizing. This is one of the most important jobs because it constitutes towards the biggest portion of your yield bonus. And you can do this at any stage. You can do it before you've drilled or planted, you can do it while you're planting, and you can even fertilize it once it's grown a few times. And there are 4 different ways that you can fertilize your field. Solid fertilizer being the most popular fertilizer. If you buy the Amazon fertilizer spreader, then always buy solid fertilizer. You can expect a variable width on this one, but it does cap at 42 meters working width, but you can lower its width depending on your field size. Liquid fertilizer again is the second most common, and this one requires a sprayer, and this can range all the way from 24 meters all the way up to 50 meters. You can adjust the width to suit your needs, but the sprayer pipes will always be at full extension, meaning that even if you want to adjust it, if you've got the 50 meter sprayer and you want to adjust it down to 24 meters, it's still gonna be 50 meters wide. The next step will be manure, and that's another popular fertilizer, and it's the farmer's favourite type of fertilizer. It's free of charge, it's natural, full of beneficial nutrients for your soil. If you have cows, horses or pigs, you will receive a lot of manure depending on the size of your operation. Another bonus for manure is the double application rate, where you will see yourself travelling at half the speed and using double the amount of manure. But you will get 100% of fertilisation states on your field. The downside to manure is that they don't have a really big working width and they have a very high consumption. Couple that with small capacity trailers, you're going to be begging for pumps and hoses or manure pipe system mods. Slurry, again a byproduct from cows and pigs. This will work in a similar way to manure. You have double application rates and you have a slightly larger tankers. The work width can be quite wide, but they cost the same price as a 4-bedroom house in Northern England. They are dedicated slurry transportation trailers, so you'll be able to reduce the amount of time you're driving backwards and forwards to your slurry tank. So digestate as well, it's a very rarely seen fertiliser on Farming Simulator, but it behaves exactly like slurry. This is normally a byproduct of a BGA, which can be expensive to purchase. So once you started filling things like silage, cut sugar beets, you'll start to produce digestates as it creates electrical charge. So you'll need a slurry tanker to collect it from the BGA, and then you can fertilise your crops in the same way that you'd do slurry. So once we've fertilised, again this is another optional, it's not mandatory step to do, but it does have an increase of 2.5% on your yield bonus, and it is rolling. Now rollers tend to be quite wide, but the only downside is that you can't lift them, so once it's unfolded you're rolling anything in your path really. The roller here will be pushing the seeds into the soil for better contact and better germination. But your crop will grow regardless of whether you do this step or not. And this one's very simple to do. You just get to the edge of your field, unfold it, drive forward, and you'll see the texture of the field change. And then we come to weed control. Now this step only applies if you have not ploughed your field, but if you have cultivated, once you advance in the following month, you'll begin to see weeds develop in your field. These weeds will reduce your yield by 15%, so we need to tackle them quickly. There are 3 ways you can handle your weed issues. Step 1, talk to a specialist. Oh wait, we're not talking about that type of stuff. Okay, so we've got weeding. Now, once you've planted your seeds, before they even germinate, you're going to want to get a weeder. and you're going to drive over that field, and it will remove any potential weeds coming up in the future. This will not change the texture of your field, so you're kind of doing this blindly or use assisted steering for a very accurate job. Weed, you have a small to medium weeds in your field, you're going to need a hoe. These will remove those pesky weeds, but don't forget to use narrow wheels when doing this, because you will be destroying your crops as you drive over them, because the weeds will only develop once your crop is germinated. But if you are doing vegetables or root crops, they're indestructible, so it doesn't matter, you can just drive over them. And then the final one, and the last resort, is herbicide. So if you did pick spraying liquid fertilizer over your crops, well, empty that sprayer, because we're going to need to fill it with herbicide. This will kill large weeds, but they will still hinder your yield. So it's best to tackle them before they become a problem, because even once you've killed them with herbicide, you're still going to lose 10% of that yield bonus. Once you've got rid of the weeds, it's time to fertilise your field again, using the method that you liked before, and then you'll get a 100% yield bonus, and that will mean you've done your job. Step number 9 will be just to occupy yourself. There's going to be a few months before your crop is ready to harvest. Either skip to harvest or find other contracts or work to do around the farm. If you play with seasons on, you can see in the crop calendar when it's ready to harvest, so you'll be able to understand the size of the gap. If you play with seasons off, the crops vary in when they grow, so it's just keeping your eye on the field. But there are plenty of things that you can do around the farm, either delve into forestry, decorate the farm a bit, it's entirely up to you. And then the final step is the glory moments of every farm, and that is harvest. This shows all that hard work has finally paid off. Depending on your crop, you will either need a combine harvester, a mower, or a specialist harvester for other crops. These are going to be the most expensive vehicle, so it may be worth leasing them every year and then eventually saving up to buy them. But because they're single use, it'll take like 20 years of leasing before you've bought one, so you know, it might be beneficial. Some crops will give you straw unless you use modifications, but these can be a great resource for a bit of food for your animals, a bit of bedding for your animals, or just a bit of extra cash on the side. So do with it what you want. Happy farming!